In this video, I want to show you how to reload pistol ammunition. In this tutorial, I am using an ammo reloader. In this case, this is a turret style made by Lee. I think this is the classic turret system. This has worked great. Some calipers and a scale. The correct dies depending on the caliber of bullet you are reloading. The correct gunpowder and primers. The correct shell holder. And a case tumbler to clean the shells. Depending on the condition of the brass that you're starting with, you would either put them in the tumbler first or you could deprime them first. I'm starting with brass that I've already shot once, so it's an empty shell with a spent primer in it right here. You can see this has already been detonated. So what I do is I always decap them first. I push this primer out, that way it's an empty shell. Then I'll be able to clean them in the tumbler and the flash hole will be cleaned at the same time. If you put them just like this into the tumbler, there's a chance that there could be residue in there, carbon buildup and stuff, and you won't get it cleaned out in the next operation. So that's what I'm going to do first, is deprime this. To deprime this, I'm just going to rotate the turret to the deprimer. All it is a small rod that'll go through like this. This will also size the round at the same time. So since this is expanded when it's shot, it'll shrink it back down. Since this is being shrunk down inside the metal die, it's deforming the brass, so there's a lot of friction. So you need to use a lubricant. You could just squeeze some out. This is a wax, it's a water-based lubricant. So you could add water to this to dilute it some. All you need is a tiny bit like this. Put it on your finger, and you could just put it on the outside of the casing. If you're doing a bunch of bullets at the same time, you can just put a bunch on your fingers and then just rub it around on a towel or something and distribute the lubricant. With the shell lubricated, it's time to deprime and size it. So I'm going to put it in the shell holder right here, like this. This slides in and it holds it so it can't move up and down. Next, I'm going to grab the arm right here and push the ram up. I get a close-up of what's happening here. So it's going to go up into the die. There's a lot of force here, so push it up. So I just pushed out the primer and collected it down here. And I'm going to push it all the way up so it full sizes it until it bottoms out. Then I'm going to pull out like that. And now you can tell that it's been resized. You might be able to see the size difference. And now it is also decapped on the bottom, so there's no primer. So now this is ready to put into the tumbler. Now, after running the shells through the deprime and sizing operation, I'm going to put them in a tumbler and set it on for about 2 hours. This should get them nice and shiny and clean of any lubricant as well as any debris that might be in the flash hole. So now I'm just going to let this sit. If you really want to make the brass shine, you could put some new finish car polish. This works really well. I just put a little bit. That's all you need. It'll mix with the shell and the dry media and really polish them up. Once the brass has been tumbling for a few hours, it's time to get all of the media out. So to do this, I just have a normal strainer over a bucket. So I'm just going to loosen this and just start pouring this in here. You could wiggle this around to get the media to go through. Since this has a lot of lead residue in it, I'm going to be wearing a respirator. You don't want to be breathing in the dust generated by this. When I get to the reloading station, I have all the brass right here. So I'm going to put them on the table right here. Same for the bullets. I'm just going to get a handful and put them right next to them. So now to get this set up, you'll need to adjust the dies depending on the size of the bullet and the length. The procedures for adjusting these will be in the manual of the reloader. But the important thing is that it follows the dimensions for the specific round. So in this case, this is a 40 caliber. So you have a max trim length for the casing. You have a maximum overall length for the entire cartridge. You need to follow these procedures. There's also a table. This is a table of load. So this depends on the bullet weight as well as the powder that you're using. So I'm using tight group, so and 165 grain bullet. So I'd find a tight group right here in this section. And the starting grains for the powder is 4.5 or 0.38 cubic centimeters. This equates to 0.37 in available die sizes. So this can only load certain sizes depending on how this is loaded up. If you're loading these manually with a scale, you can make them exactly how you want them. Once all of your dies are adjusted to the correct lengths that you need, depending on the bullet depth and cramp and sizing or anything else, you'll then need to test the powder. Even though I've set this up, you always need to test it beforehand to make sure it's distributing the right amount of powder if you're using an auto loader like this. So to do that, you could get a bullet that already has a prime in it. You put it right here, scoot the turret over till the powder through function, and then you would fill this up, pour the powder onto your scale, precision scale, make sure it's in the grains, and make sure it's between the minimum and maximum amount from the instructions. You do not want to go over this because it'll create too much pressure. So at this point the dies are adjusted and you know that you're putting the right amount of powder in. So now it's time to load up the primer that came with it. So this is a semi-automatic type primer. It makes it fairly easy. So I have the primers right here. They come in a little box like this. These do need to be facing a certain way. These need to be facing up. The good thing is though that since they're bottom heavy, they automatically go up if you shake them. So I'm just gonna shake them until they get to this side. What I do is actually put magnets right here to counterweight it. At this point I have powder loaded up and it's adjusted. It's at putting the right amount of powder. All the dies are adjusted and I just put all the primers into the dispenser. So now I am completely ready to go. So I have my bullets and my casings right here. So I'm going to start with the empty one. Make sure there's no primer in it. Make sure it's clean. So I'm going to rotate this into the size and D primer. Even though I've already deprimed them, you need to use this to put the primer in. So first, the way this dispenser works is when you put the rim up, I want to bottom it out, you just push this forward like this. And now there's a primer sitting in this little holder right here. So I'm going to go down. As I go down, it flips it up. I put a little catch right here to make sure it does that. And I'm going to put the shell in at this point as I'm coming down. I'm going to hold and go all the way down. So it's also rotating the turret at the same time. Once I reach the bottom, it's just touching the bottom of the shell. So I need to force the primer in there as a press fit. So what I do is I hold the reloader like this and push up firmly and you'll feel resistance. Once it stops, you don't need to go anymore. You can tell that it's completely sitting flush. You don't want to go too high. You don't want to go too far in either. So just flush with the surface is fine. I'm going to put this back in. Now I'm going to put it through the powder feeder. During this step, there's also a flare created at the mouth of the shell. This is so the bullet can sit in there when you put the bullet in. So there will be some force here as it expands the mouth open. So again, I'm holding the reloader like this. If you had a very firm table, you don't have to do this, but mine flexes a lot. So I'm going to come up with the ram. It's going to lift up and flare at the same time. You can see the powder moved right here. So it dispensed powder in there and then this slid over and it just went all the way through into the bullet. So as I come back down, it's going to go back and then I'm going to have to pull out hard because it's stuck on the die from flaring it. Every few times it's good to look to make sure you're getting powder in there and it's going in the correct amount. It's very obvious if you double load these. If for some reason you put up there, went down a tiny bit and then went back up, it will put two loads into it. So you got to make sure that you're not doing that. It won't be able to see the bullet because the volume is so much that there's no room to spit a bullet at that point. So it's not like you can load it double the amount for this specific load anyways. But it's always good to be double checking every few rounds that there's powder in there and it's at the correct level. So now that the mouth has been flared and powder has been put in, it's time to load a bullet. So I'm going to come back down. It's going to rotate the turret. I have a bullet in my hand right here. So as I'm coming up, I'm just going to sit it there at the mouth of the casing. All it is sitting there, and it doesn't need to be that straight. It needs to be fairly straight, but you don't need to worry about getting it perfect. So I'm going to come up with the ram, and it's going to seat the bullet to the correct depth. Make sure bottom out, come back down. You can see the bullet has been seated. So I'm going to rotate it, and then I'm going to come up, and this is going to put a crimp around the casing right here. This isn't necessary, but it's good if the bullet's a little loose. So I'm going to come up, and it's going to crimp it. I'm going to pull back down, and now here is a completely assembled and ready to shoot cartridge. You can see it's at the correct depth. I always inspect these. Make sure, obviously, there's a primer in there. Sometimes you might forget to put a primer in. It'll be obvious because the powder will just fall through the bottom and create a mess. But you want to inspect for any tears in the casing. Make sure it's uniformly seated and there are no issues. So now I'm just going to set this aside right here. That's basically the full process. This is a repetitive exercise, so make sure everything is ergonomic as possible. I'm just going to go through a couple loadings to show you how you get in the rhythm of it. Once you reloaded the ammo, it's good to make sure and keep these separated depending on how many times the brass has been shot. You don't want to shoot these pistols more than about 8 or 10 or so, because they'll start to fatigue, and then there's a chance that it could split when you shoot. There's not much pressure compared to a rifle, but these do fatigue. And that is how to reload pistol ammunition with a turret style of reloader. Thanks for watching.